All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome again. My name is Deanna Uzarski, and I am on the marketing team here at Insight Partners. And we are so excited to have everyone here joining us today. We have some really great speakers, a really great session that are going to show you how to really put the growth acceleration framework into practice when you are entering a new market or segment. We can go ahead to the next slide. Before we begin, I just have a few housekeeping things. So the session is being recorded. So if you want to share this or give it a rewatch, keep an eye out. That will be emailed to you by end of week. If you have any questions, please let us know. We're going to dedicate some time today to addressing any questions you guys have. So make sure you put it in the Q&A box and upvote each other's if there's one that you want to hear more than the other. And then please take the quick survey at the end. We really appreciate it. And it helps us make sure all of our sessions get better and better for all of you guys. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Pablo, who is our moderator today.
Thanks, Deanna. I really appreciate it. Quick legal disclaimer. What you're about to hear are examples from some of our portfolio companies. They don't represent the entire portfolio, et cetera, et cetera. My name is Pablo Dominguez. I run the advisory team here at Insight Partners, and I'll be joined today by Travis Kassay and Barrie Markowitz. Travis is one of our sales go-to-market leaders supporting our portfolio companies, and Barrie is one of our marketing go-to-market leaders also supporting our portfolio companies. Both have been former operators in companies and work very closely with over the 500 companies that we have supporting us here at Insight. So for those of you real quick that are joining and are not aware of Insight Partners and who we are, we're a B2B SaaS software investor based in New York City. Have been doing business for over 30 years. We have over 512 active portfolio companies. You can see how many total company investments we have, $80 billion under management. We do investments in everything from early stage companies, mid-stage companies, and late-stage companies, so a good breadth of companies. So the examples you'll see today can be applied regardless of the size of portfolio company or company that you might potentially be in. And about us and our team, in case you're wondering how we support, we're part of the Onsite Team. That's our growth engine supporting our portfolio companies, which really focuses on three things. In-house experts like Travis and Barrie that work with our portfolio companies. We offer targeted solutions. As an example, we have a Gen AI solution that we work with our companies on to help them drive additional productivity. We also help expand networks as you look to enter an enterprise market, or if you're looking to hire executives or different resources, we have network teams that help you do that. So it just gives you a little flavor of some of the things we do. So as we now get into the meat of today, and I know this is probably showing up small on your screen, this is our SaaS growth acceleration framework. And wherever you look online, every company has, including us until about a year ago, different frameworks for marketing, for product, for sales, for customer success. And one thing we've tried to do is put those together into a single framework to show the importance of the interdependencies between making changes, whether, again, we're talking today about going in a new market or a new segment. And you'll get to see how the framework allows you to see where I should be focusing my time versus just thinking about my specific function. And why that's important is because as you're making changes, your head of marketing, your head of product, and sales might just be thinking about their world, and they're not necessarily tying together what happens upstream or downstream. And so I think this framework will allow you to tell one complete story. So with that, excited to introduce Travis Kassay, who will walk us through our examples. Travis.
Thanks, Pablo. So we're going to cover two different seismic shifts that companies face as they continue to grow their organizations. I'll cover the move from one market into a new one, and Barrie's going to talk about moving from one segment into another segment. Now, when we think about the growth acceleration framework, on the next slide, Pablo, we built the framework to highlight a variety of different things. We're going to talk about a few of the key areas today. And as we drill into this on the next slide, we're going to look at specifically, in my example, market intelligence, customer intelligence, messaging and positioning, sales and product and marketing strategies, and as well as demand generation. That's not to say that the other elements aren't important. Each of them has an impact on the overall success of these different strategies. It's just that in the case that we're going to be talking about, these were the ones that we really focused in on. But as Pablo talked about in the disclaimer, it's going to change based on your specific company's situation. Now, drilling into the case study that we've got for the expansion into a new market. Can you go back one slide, Pablo? I'm sorry. We've got a European company that is building out employee productivity tools. They wanted to expand into the US. They talked to their board. The board was pushing them to expand because there was significant market opportunity in the US for them. And they did what a lot of companies will do. They added a bunch of salespeople into the US. And there were some challenges with that. And we'll get into those challenges. Now, one of the big things to take away from this discussion is this solution was not a replacement tool. So this wasn't something where people already understood how it fit within the overall framework of a set of tools or set of software that a company has. This was a new and unique tool. So it ended up requiring a very evangelical style sales pitch. So let's talk about the challenges they faced and what we did to address that. So some of the core challenges were that they had spent a significant amount of money building out a sales team in the US market, and that sales team simply wasn't generating sales. They had hired quickly, they brought in a lot of reps that may or may not have fit the overall profile that they were looking for, and they had tasked them with going out and driving awareness in the market and closing deals. The challenge with that is there was also a lack of awareness of the overall issue and the specific solution that they were offering for that issue in the marketplace. And they were stretching the resources that they had very, very thin. So what we did was we worked with them on a variety of different items. We helped them take a look at the overall market, understand what the competitive position was, understand who the different players were and how to target the market in a way that set them apart from their competition. We also talked to them about how to restructure that sales team and reuse the money that they were spending on the salespeople so that they could really drive into the mid-market specific area. The next piece that we did was we drove awareness through SEO and through direct email campaigns. We needed to make sure that the market was aware of the product and the problem before we put in place a lot of salespeople to follow up on that. And then we took a look at the leadership team and we made sure that we had the right people in the roles. And that's key to making sure that any of these different things are successful. We brought in a new CRO who had experience in expansions, and we had brought in a marketing leader who was more skilled at driving awareness and had experience in that. What happened is, over the course of the past 4 years, we've been able to take a market that was really struggling. I think they were generating somewhere close to $1 million on nearly $3 million in spend. And we took that, and now it's an organization that's highly profitable. They're driving about $50 million in sales in the US today. They've taken this framework that starts out focusing first on marketing and then building out sales to handle the leads, and they've deployed it in 4 additional markets. Today, the US represents nearly 45% of the company's revenue, when back in 2019, it represented almost none of it. So this is just one example of how a company that's entering into a new market might want to take a look at some of those core elements within the framework. Now I'm going to turn it over to Barrie, who's going to talk through entering into a new segment. Barrie?
Thank you, Travis. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So this may sound familiar to many of you on the call. You started out running your business, founding your business, targeting a segment. But the macro conditions, your product was solved such a need that you started to get interest from another segment. And that's exactly what happened here. This is an example of a high growth e-commerce SaaS solution who was starting out in the mid-market, both retail and manufacturing, and began to receive inbound from enterprise prospects, enterprise accounts. Why? Because the competitors were primarily what we call monoliths. They were not flexible and they required a long time for implementation. And this product was flexible and faster to get into market with. So after winning several large enterprise deals, the company made a strategic decision to really go big in the enterprise. Pablo, if you could go to the next slide. So as Travis said before, when you think about that framework, there's a lot of those boxes apply to going into a new segment, in this case, to the enterprise. I just picked a few here to talk about because one of the lessons you're going to see is don't try and do everything at once. Really focus on what matters. So what mattered here in terms of the key challenges were the following. One was they went from a single decision maker, the IT or technical buyer, VP of IT, to a committee sale. And as part of that committee, one of the key target personas was the economic or the business buyer. So in this case, could be the chief digital officer, a GM of the e-com division. And so this company had to build out not only messaging, but content, because this buyer didn't know about this company. And so that was a big challenge that we spent some time with the company on. The next piece had to do with the seller profile. And there were two pieces to this. One was the mid-market sellers were used to single buyer, and again, a faster sale. So in this case, the CRO really had to evaluate what were the existing sellers going to be able to move up market, or did he need to train them, or did he need new ones? The same was true for the reseller model. In this case, the really large global retailers often use systems integrators. Well, this company didn't have a relationship there, and it's crucial to get into those relationships. So the seller and partner strategy needing to change. And then the last piece of this is that for the business buyer, brand mattered. And so this brand was relatively unknown. So a lot of stuff to think about. Where did the company reach out to Insight, and where did we pitch in? So a bunch of time with the CRO, and not just once, but ongoing on partner profile, seller profiles, enterprise seller profiles, and enterprise selling motion. A piece that I actually worked on with my sales colleagues, like Travis and Pablo, was we did an account-based workshop where we literally brought the selling team and the marketing team together and created campaigns targeted at some of these global retail accounts. And then sort of the icing on the cake to that was, how to do that at scale. So Pablo mentioned before, we have a generative AI workshop that we do with our portfolio companies. And in this case, it was how to create personalized campaigns at scale that are on brand, that are really meaningful, not just a name change, but meaningful to that persona. So you can read the results on this page. This company had quite a bit to do. They have continued to grow double digit or almost triple quarter over quarter. And I think the real thing to just take away from this page is figure out the boxes of that revenue acceleration framework that matters, focus on those, and then iterate. Okay, back to you, Pablo.
Pablo, you're on mute.
I'm like technical difficulty extraordinaire today. We got a couple of questions that have come in already. And for those of you that are on, if you want to send a question into the Q&A, feel free to do so. Couple of things. Two, the link to the framework is in the chat. I think Deanna posted that. So if you guys want to put that in, I'll stop sharing also so you can see us fully. Second is question came in from an individual. I'll tee this one up first for Travis. It sounds like you're suggesting that entering a new market should first focus on marketing and not just hire a bunch of sales reps. I totally agree with this, as marketing drives sales. What are the marketing efforts that worked in your example?
Yeah, one of the challenges that can come with just hiring salespeople into a market, especially if there's not an awareness of the issue, there's not an awareness of your product or your brand, the salespeople end up having to do a brute force sales motion. So basically, the old-fashioned dialing for dollars. Go through a call list, you're calling into as many people as you possibly can. The success rate on that's fairly low. I mean, you're basically educating the market as well as trying to close a deal, and that's consuming a lot of the time from a salesperson. What we had done in this case is we worked with them to revamp their website. We had done some search engine optimization work with them as well, so that they showed up higher in overall searches for employee productivity tools. And then we worked with them to do some outreach to some of the core customers within their ICP. So using email campaigns through, I think in their case, they used Marketo as the marketing automation, but doesn't matter what you've got, doing some sort of email campaign will help drive in leads. As they built out the leads, then they followed up with a build out of the sales team that matched that buildup of leads. So if you've got 100 leads coming in, you may want to have 1 or 2 sales reps, and then you start building from there. It makes it a much more economical approach, and you make your sales reps more successful. And you avoid the fact that if you hire a bunch of salespeople that are all unsuccessful, word gets out in the market pretty quickly that it's not a great place to work, and it makes filling those roles much more challenging in the future. So there's a lot of benefits to being thoughtful about how you go forward. And in this case, leveraging marketing with SEO and demand gen was extremely impactful.
Cool. Thanks, Travis. And again, another question came in around, will we be providing this, the materials? If you email marketing@insightpartners.com, we are happy to share the materials. Another question came in from Jeff. How do you leverage the success in the original market to go into the target market?
Yeah, so in this case, we were able to reference some of the big customer wins that they had. They had some very large name German customers that had broad global appeal. And we had worked through with those customers the right to reuse their names. So we used the use cases and the customer testimonials from that to start to build an understanding of how this solution could really impact the customers. And then, so I think when you think of big European companies, sometimes it gets a little bit challenging to resonate between, say, a European company and a US. The ones I'm talking about are companies like Adidas or Bear or companies like that. So they were able to take those big names, explain how they use the solution, and then that helped position them appropriately in the US. We also worked through a multi-touch campaign with them on that demand gen side. So starting out with just a high level, here's what the underlying issue is. Do you ever deal with this challenge? Then building to examples of how other companies are dealing with the challenge. Then you get into the specifics of how these European companies have tackled it. And then that drives towards eventually setting up a meeting with a salesperson. So it was a multi-pronged approach, leveraging the success that they had had in their local market to try to expand into Europe.
Barrie, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would love to add a few things. So one thing that was really critical in the case of the one I'm talking about was that they used in this, so this is a segment, the intelligence that the selling org got from the channel partners, the global system integrators and the hyperscalers, was great. And that's really because you need such a you need to know what the pain is, who the right person is to talk to, make sure you're connecting the message with that person, and actually even maybe an introduction to get through to them. So don't discount even if you have a channel or a partnership org, how to use that to really make sure that you got the right intel and you're getting the right intros. And the other piece I would say, I've seen when I did a project, and it was interesting. There was a case study, and I knew the company because I had registered for something on my registry from this like German crystal company, but it was not widely known in the US. So I think you have to really take a dispassionate look at the customer case studies and make sure they're going to resonate in that new market, is the other watch out I would give you.
Cool. Thank you, Barrie.
Sure.
All right, we got a couple of questions. Steve, thank you. Are there any examples of companies you've seen go down market? Presently, our customer universe is 200,000 people. We target the top 1,000 and we offer a 100K ACV product, vertical SaaS business at 10 million in ARR, and they're getting a lot of interest going down market. Small company, it's about 25 million in revenue, 50 people, so they're not large. I can answer this also. Gainsight, which was one of our former companies, now a Vista company, started out primarily enterprise. Steve, I know you're welcome to reach out to Nick Mehta. He's always very open to the community in terms of sharing how they built out their product. The thing to keep in mind when you're going from upmarket to downmarket is your product priced accordingly downmarket? Is it too complex, or have you simplified it so that you're not providing an overly complex solution for a customer that just wants basic functionality? And what does a competitive landscape look like, right? You're going to have competitors that are easier to implement. If you take 6 months to implement and your competitors are, 2 weeks, a month, regardless of how good your solution, that might be inhibiting your ability to go down. And then your follow-up question, which was, hey, you're lean, you're 25 million in revenue, should you go now? It depends, right? If you've got enough TAM to go after the enterprise and the upper mid-market, given the current economic environment, focus there and continue winning before you start to potentially dilute your engineering team, having to shift your sales teams to go down market, unless you really see significant growth opportunities down there. Okay?
Pablo, can I?
Absolutely, Barrie. Do you want to add something?
Yeah. So I was going to say, this is a question that comes up a lot. And I think if there's a way for you to figure out whether your team can, right? What are your priorities? And if your team can handle this workload and you make it more of a self-service go-to-market, right? So that your sales team is largely not involved, then it adds a really nice revenue stream. And there's a way to do it such that, and your product's ready, all that other good stuff, right? That you can do it. But if you have to trade off these pieces of like, well, where's my sales team going to focus their efforts? Then you focus on what you know you can do. So I think there's like, it's a matter of capacity, priority, and how streamlined you can make that. In this special case, I'm going to small business or very small business.
One other thing to keep in mind is as you start building out new products to go to different segments of the market, you need to be aware of what it is your core segment really values. So we've seen companies that have built out successful enterprise businesses develop a down market solution, but not pressure tests whether the enterprise customers would prefer that down market solution. You can quickly erode your revenue stream if you put out a product that meets all the needs of your primary buyer and is cheaper. So you'll watch the enterprise slide down while you then win net new mid-market customers or even SMB customers. But you've got to be careful in how you structure it all. So it really requires a thoughtful approach to product as well as to sales and marketing, which is part of the reason we built out this framework, so that you could look at all of the different things that would need to be considered as you go through some sort of new product launch.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis. All right, we got a bunch of questions here. Victoria, with people becoming blind to email campaigns and or labeling them as spam, and now Google simultaneously moving for more answers, et cetera, et cetera. Oh my gosh, I lost her because we're people typing. More specifically, how did the companies manage to maintain focus and revenue without being distracted by the new approach? No, sorry.
I think you blended two of hers.
Yeah, sorry. It's moving quickly. Sorry. Victoria's was, in your two examples entering new markets or segments, what was the impact on sales during the pivot and change in focus for the GTM teams? More specifically, how did the companies manage to maintain focus and revenue without being distracted by the new approach?
Barrie, do you want to start out?
Yeah, I can. Sure. I mean, so the company it's a great product and they were growing well. So in this case, it wasn't a distraction. It became an imperative from going to mid-market to enterprise because they were solving a really hard solution. If you think back to what we went through the past couple of years in COVID, retailers needed to pivot. They needed to do curbside delivery. They need to, right? It was all these different things that the market just didn't have a solution for. So it was you could call that a seismic event, and this company doubled down. So they still, they added, is what I would say. They didn't abandon the mid-market. They added, but they had the proof that it worked. And they didn't add everybody all at once. They started slowly and built.
Cool. Anonymous attendee, with people becoming blind to email campaigns and or labeling them as spam, and now Google simultaneously moving more to answers, which means that outbound and content may not be as effective in the future as they were in the past. What do you see as the most cost-effective way to build awareness in new markets going forward? Barrie.
Yes. So I'm sure you can read our blog post by my colleague Neil Barron about the search generative experience. I would say for nearly a year, we've been studying what's going on here, and with Gen AI and search. And so we've been working with a lot of our portfolio companies because SEO is going to change and it's incredibly important. So check out that blog post. Dee is going to get it and share it in the link. For those of you that are portfolio companies, you can fill out a request to chat with Neil. That's one. There's many other pieces of this, right? So paid search. I mean, the digital world will still exist. It's just going to change and you need to stay on top of it. There are certain cases where events are still going to be really important, but you're going to have to make big trade-offs, right? Some of the big trade shows are really expensive. They're noisy as anything. So what is the right way to get in front of that audience in a meaningful way? Lean in to what Gen AI gives you and the ability to do mass personalization at scale. Because if you don't, everybody else is going to. So the bar is going to raise really quickly, and the marketing departments are getting hit first. Okay, over to you, Travis, on that. No?
I don't have anything material to add to that, other than I do think there is still an opportunity to leverage email if you've got the right sort of messaging, if you're really understanding what the customer needs are, and then you're following it up with sales engagement. I think it still consistently works. Maybe the hit rates are a little bit lower than it used to be, but still a viable opportunity.
There's also a big distinction there. Sorry, one more point. Whether somebody's an existing customer and you're going for an expansion opportunity versus a prospect, we can't emphasize enough about keeping your data clean and your email list great, because customer marketing, if you looked at our, again, our blog posts and everything from the last year, it's much easier to get another dollar out of an existing customer and delight them with a new offering than it is a prospect. So that's something to that's different than entering a new market, but it's another product in your market. So something to really, email's not dead, not by a long shot.
Cool. Thank you both. All right, next question. How do you change go-to-market messaging and sales motions when it's a replacement versus not replacement? So evangelical versus you're replacing the incumbent.
Yeah, so I think the main thing is you don't have to spend as much time trying to drive awareness of the issue. You can spend more time differentiating your product from your competitors' products and skilling up your sales teams on how to plant landmines and also avoid those that are planted by the competitors. So it just allows you to focus a bit more. Barrie, I'm not sure if you've got something you'd like to add to that.
I do. I do, yeah. So we call this, there's many times, or a lot of our companies have products for which there's not an established category with the analysts, and there's not a budget line. And so what the companies really need to do is to really educate the market through thought leadership, through influencers, through communities of people who actually have this pain but didn't even know there was a solution that solved it. So there's a multi-pronged approach. If you went back to that house, you could see it. Some of it falls under demand gen, but you could like break open that demand gen box, and it's about thought leadership, awareness, genuine, like authentic helping in community. And that first, don't go right and sell, because it's going to fall flat because nobody knows that they need it yet. But some of those are the most interesting examples of success in the portfolio.
Cool. All right, question from Ron. From your collective experience, is it easier to go from mid to enterprise or enterprise to mid SMB? Or is it a case-by-case basis? Any rules of thumb to think about that would indicate which end to start? Before you guys answer, Steve, who asked the original question, I think they got to 25 million with 100K ACVs and are now thinking about going down market. So I think it does matter case by case, Ron. I don't think there's a right place to start. It's just what business do you have? What makes sense? Can you get traction and get product market fit and then decide to go up market? Now, remember, there's been a lot of companies like Monday.com that have gotten to 100 million plus without going enterprise, right? And then they ultimately decide to go enterprise. So there also is no threshold on, well, how high do I have to go before I flip? It's literally is on a case by case basis, depending on your TAM, your customer segments, et cetera. But Barrie or Travis, I don't know if you want to add something else.
Yeah, I'll play the contrarian here. I actually do think it differs. I don't know that one is easier than the other, but I do think there are certain things you need to keep in mind. Is your product easy to implement? If the product isn't easy to implement, meaning it's going to take you a long time to get it stood up, going down market where suddenly it opens it up to a much broader pool of potential customers is going to be a challenge. You're going to need to rethink how your product is structured. You're also going to have to think about how your implementation team supports it. But barring any of that, if you're assuming that the product can move either way fairly easily, I don't know that there's one that's easier than the other. I think there are challenges with both. If you've got a sales and a marketing team that's used to positioning an enterprise level sale, where you've got multiple people in the decisioning process and you're trying to get all of them bought in on what your solution is, having those people then shift to something that's more down market, targeted towards a single buyer or maybe one buyer with an influencer, it's going to mean a shift in how you approach things. And you're going to probably need to staff up net new sellers, and you may even need to add some additional people that are focused on only that area for your marketing team. But Barrie, I'm curious to see your take on it.
No, I would say it's situation dependent. The one thing I think we saw, like a year or two ago, is that a lot of companies thought that they could create a PLG offering and it would enable them an easy way to go into SMB, for example, or in the case where it was a single buyer. And I would say in some cases it worked and in some cases it didn't. And it has to do with what Travis is saying is, was it a feature boxed offering? Was it a time boxed offering, right? We started to see that full feature access was better. But if you don't give them enough time, it depends on the frequency of use of the product. So in some cases it worked for conversion for, a small, I would say a single user, but in other cases it didn't. So I would think long and hard before you think that that's the answer to your going down market to the SMB segment.
Cool. All right, next question. What role do analyst firms like Gartner, IDC, Forrester play in the enterprise market? At what size does one start looking as an analyst strategy? We're a consumer intelligence SaaS company. Our ACV starts at 300K. Barrie, maybe you can talk about some of the AR work that our team does with Porcos, just to give people a sense of what to do there.
If your target persona is, first of all, if your ICP is the enterprise and your target persona is a senior IT buyer, you must have an analyst relations strategy. It doesn't mean you have to pay for a seat. It just means you have to have strategy. And we have developed really robust advisory around this, both the narrative, how to, submit for the waves, as well as working with CEOs and founders on, how they talk to the analysts. So it's crucial. We also, for what it's worth, Downmarket a little bit, the peer review sites are really important. That's one of your SEO candy things. So not only do people go to them for information, but it also drives good traffic. So, but yes, I can't stress enough the importance of analyst relations if that's your buyer, if CIOs, VP of IT, etc.
Cool. Thanks, Barrie.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any more examples of what not to do when entering new markets? I mean, I'm sure there's a million, right? But one thing to keep in mind is don't go into a new market or a segment just for the sake of it, right? Make sure you are planning very effectively on what the impact is on marketing, on sales, on product. Is the juice worth the squeeze, especially in today's constrained financial environment? That's the biggest thing of a reason not to do it. But if all things point to huge potential, the product's ready, you've got the team ready, then absolutely do it. But Barrie, Travis, real quick, one thing to think about for not going into a new market, or things about not to do.
I would say be focused. So I have an example of where a company did both at the same time, geo and segment, and they were just spread too thin. So pick a lane.
Yeah. I'd say think like an investor. So you've got a set amount of money that you can spend on your sales and marketing organizations, and you have to think through the value of spending the money in one of the current markets you're in or current segments you're in versus investing in the net new. So we recently had a company come to us and say, hey, we're doing okay in the US. We entered it last year. What's next? And the challenge is there's still so much more to be done in the US, and they're having some traction there. So you're probably better off spending the incremental money in the US until you start seeing a slowdown in growth, or you've got that so dialed in that you can then shift over to another segment or market and go through the expansion process there. But to Barry's point, it's don't spread yourself too thin, but be thoughtful in how you pick where you want to spend your money.
Excellent. Next one. Do you have any advice about email marketing and how to tailor messaging when you are entering the US market? Barrie, that's right up your alley.
Yes. So I'm thinking you have approval, you have, right? So you have to first make sure you're not spamming. But I think what email is not the answer to alone, right? It's got to be they have to have awareness to even open that email of your company, right? So yes, you should have good email. You should continue to A/B test. You should keep a clean list. But email is part of what we call, it's like a multi-pronged, campaign where you're using other media channels that are crucial to your buyer that they pay attention to. And so email is just like one piece of that, but cold email is very difficult to work. So think about local events, think about publishing, blog, great content, etc. But email alone ain't going to do it.
But just to ask a question on that, Barrie, would you ever just take your local market content, say you currently exist in Spain, just translate that to English and deploy it in the US?
Well, it depends. So if your buyer is exactly the same and their pain is exactly the same and the translation's decent, you could. But if I had to bet, I would bet that the market conditions are somewhat different between the US and Spain. The buyers may have different pain points, so probably not going to work. You need to do your homework. I mean, absolutely. I assume that question was more about the media piece of it than the content, but maybe I'm wrong. So, but
Cool.
Thanks for that clarification.
Another one for you, Barrie. What % of your portfolio companies outsource technical marketing content? We are struggling with that and have not found the correct fit to bring in-house?
Yeah. So I think some do. Listen, I've seen people find people on Upwork that have been amazing. What I would tell you, I learned this from one of our portfolio companies. The best thing to do is to go to your engineering team, your cybersecurity, your analyst team, if you're a cyber company, have them write it. You can always have a copy editor edit it. And I know ChatGPT, a lot of people like to use that or some of our other companies to write, but you have really technical expertise in your company. If you're marketing to technical people, find them, get the information out of them and copy edit it and find a way. By the way, the technical buyer may not even respond to an email. So you also need to find a way to get to that technical buyer in a way that they're going to pay attention. That's a whole nother webinar for another day.
Cool. Another question from Ron. Follow up to the enterprise and mid-market question. Would you agree that you shouldn't try to do both, i.e. pick one or the other, assuming you could get traction in either? The problem exists in both and pricing isn't a problem. Travis, you want to take that one?
If you're saying enter both simultaneously, I'd say be careful. That's a quick way to get distracted. But my guess is it's more of you can either go from one down or the other up, because that refers back to your original question. I think if you are already successful in enterprise, expanding into mid-market is a great way to expand your overall addressable market and drive more revenue. Same thing goes the opposite direction. So there's lots of value, and we encourage companies, especially as they get up into the $20 to $40 million range, to start expanding into new segments or into new markets. By the time you're upwards of 100 million, you probably are already in multiple markets and maybe even going into multiple segments in multiple markets. It's how you're going to get long-term growth, but you have to figure out where you've got the best traction, invest there first, get a good presence going, and then continue to grow.
Thank you, Travis. And one final question, Barrie. Is ChatGPT good enough for doing translation of marketing to local markets, or do I still need to hire an agency?
I would say a translation service. I would say you should test it and see, because I think you don't always get the same answer out of ChatGPT, right? So we're not suggesting a wholesale, like just do it and don't look at it, but I would certainly test it for sure.
Absolutely agree. This is one of those where you can experiment and see, are you getting good enough results and traction for free versus charging an agency.
But
Well, thank you all very much for joining us. We're at time and want to be respectful of your time. Again, hopefully you can access the materials that Deanna's put in the chat. If you have any questions in your portfolio company, you know who to reach out to. You can email marketing@insightpartners.com if you want access to the framework or any of the materials that we use today. Hope you all have a great Tuesday, and thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.